Warm welcome to a new episode of the Executive Fire podcast. My guest today is Oz, a senior executive. Oz is leading a large unit of several thousand people in the IT industry. His executive fire index profile is very much relying on his traits, so very much a very strong raw resilience. Yet in the first measurement, habits not very developed, and life satisfaction wasn't all that high. And then 18 months later, we took the second measurement after an intense work with a resilience coach, and we see how the values have developed. So let's go into this interesting debriefing with Oz. Welcome to another episode of the Executive Fire podcast. My guest today is Oz. Oz is an executive in the IT industry. Oz, without going too much into your company, but maybe explain the nature of what you do so that we understand the world that you live in.
Sure. So I work, as you mentioned, in the IT industry. I would call it I work in the software industry, right? And the role I have, right, I'm running a large division in one of the world's largest software companies, and in my role, kind of like I have a high level of accountability for delivery of our services, so our software capabilities in the form of a cloud. I also do have a quite significant accountabilities when it comes to optimizing the costs of goods sold, the cost of cloud, optimizing companies' cloud gross margin, as well as ensuring that we deliver our cloud services at a level of quality which satisfies and excites our customers. So it's quite a large unit I'm running, a fairly large responsibility. It is a software engineering or engineering kind of work. So that's my discipline I'm coming from. I'm coming from that background. And yeah, it's kind of like a global role, right? So I do get to travel a lot. I do run a large global team, and that, that affects, the level of stress, the level of challenge, the level of complexity. It's all influenced by the fact that this is a, global company, a global role, and a quite intensive role.
Okay. And it was 18 months ago, you did the first Executive Fire Index. Can you describe for us the space that you were in, the mental space, the headspace that you were in back then?
Well, it was 18 months is a very, very long time. So I'm gonna try to kind of like remember, to be honest with you, because it was a while ago. Feels like, lifetimes ago in considering the rhythm that I'm living in, in the
You know
last
what?
couple
Let
of
me
years.
remind you, because
So remind me.
let's go to your AFI profile, the first one, 18 months ago. And what we see here to your AFI profile, the first one, 18 months ago. And what we see here is we see a life satisfaction 50 out of 100. So back in these days, you were kind of not happy. And I think it was multiple pressures, relatively new to the role, very political. Private situation was also changing. I think when I recall correctly, you were also moving. So there were a lot of moving parts, both in the professional life and in the private life.
Yes, it was, I remember now. So it was basically what? It was toward the end of 23, right?
Yes, it was
So
September 23.
I was still fresh in my role, right? Trying to figure out the scope of it. I did not have a leadership team in place, right? I didn't have, kind of like some of the key actors I needed to push things forward, right? So the level of ambiguity was very high. I was still trying to figure out all the aspects of the role, everything which was buried in our budget, everything we were supposed to do. I came in, like how would I put it, that the reputation of the unit I was taking over was not that good. We had to turn it around. It was not perceived as a high performing organization, and its leaders were not perceived as high performing leaders. So that created like very high level of stress. I was working on a very high level of pressure, right? With fairly extreme, I would say, working hours as well, right, at that time. And then also prior to that, we kind of like recently relocated from one part of the Germany to another part of the Germany, right? So kind of like, all the things coming with the relocation, with with our son kind of like going into the new school, working through that. Yeah. So that had quite significant impact on the satisfaction. Also, I was like, the tools and mechanisms and everything were had in my toolbox, so to say, to handle the stress, right, was not good enough for what I was being exposed to at the time, right? So I had to master some new things and alter my behaviors and figure things out. And that's why we were working together, right, as
Hmm.
well at that
Hmm.
time.
Okay, yeah. And so I mean, your profile, I mean, was very inspiring for me from a technical perspective, because what we see here is 78 in terms of the trades back then. So this is very high. I actually brought in some research. We have done our first research with a norm group with 538 managers, and what we see here, based on the career level that you are in, be it senior management or top management, doesn't really matter. They are like around the 65 points, right? You are 78. So there was really an element of, I'm toughing it out, right? I have a thick skin. I'm very robust. And which is good. I mean, which is a good strategy to a degree. I mean, it's a good thing, but there are challenges, and the challenges are that you might not invest enough into your habits, into your lifestyles, into your routines, and you're relying very much on your thick skin. And then eventually you're no longer coping, and then there's nothing to back you up, right? So that is
Yes.
the risk here. And what we saw here was on the habits, on the coping strategies, 61, again here, comparison to a norm group. And there we see it's something like 73, right? So higher on the traits than average, than the norm group, lower on the habits than the norm group, and also in terms of life satisfaction in your age bracket is also here we are in the 70s, right? So 72, 73, also here subpar in terms of life satisfaction. So not a status quo to be happy with, right? Or to live by, because at the end of the day, the idea of resilience is also that in your, in the stratosphere in which you are in, where the air is thin, that you learn strategies to be happy, right? And to enjoy the ride, not only to suffer, right?
Indeed.
So that was the kind of the starting point.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's recap. So we had need for in terms of the traits, we had low need for emotional stability, high ambiguity tolerance, right? That was emphasized.
Yep.
High extroversion, you're a great communicator, and also high originality, meaning high openness for change. So stuff coming your way isn't really bothering you. On the other hand, there's always a limit, right? And people who have these traits typically also like to take on a lot and take on much more than anybody else would be able to cover. So then you're also getting towards an edge, right? So that is
Yes.
something that can happen. And then we had the habits. Also here, what is interesting, not so high, but self-management much more expressed than self-awareness. Self-management meaning self-discipline, impulse control, also, tenacity, grit, all that stuff, right? So the hardiness, the toughness aspects very much pronounced, right? And how do you make sense of that if you see that?
Well, it does make sense, right? I mean, I do have high level of resilience to external effects and external situations, like the stuff you mentioned, like things around, my tenacity, ability to recover from a shock, to control how I'm going to tackle things. It doesn't mean that I'm always like acting really cool and controlled, but it does mean, again, aspect of control. I can look how I'm getting angry, and I can look very emotional, but I still control that. And I'm often doing that intentionally. What I've seen is that, being able to show a level of emotion, especially in high pressure situations, can be very beneficial because, you are human in the end. But losing control, especially if you're in a senior executive role, is something that is not acceptable, right? Also internally, like, so people can still think, oh, he's getting very, very angry. Well, I may look angry because I'm making a point or I want to create a pressure or something else. But, and also telling that often to some people who are close to me, don't ever think I'm doing everything I do is intentional. And everything I do in a professional environment is with a purpose. Even if it looks that, oh, like he's gotten really angry, like he's losing control. No, 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 no. It's intentional. There is a method to the madness, even when it looks like a madness. And of course, I usually try not to make it look like a madness, absolutely. But sometimes you have to, right? Sometimes you have to. We recently had a situation, I had a kind of like a conflict, which was brewing between two organizations, and it was like brewing, 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 and I was trying to push my team to resolve it at a level below the senior executive level, right? Because I knew that if they bring me and that other executive into the call, it's not going to end up well because he's super aggressive and I can, and even like borderline sometimes too aggressive. If I do not respond, it's going to be problematic for everybody, for my team, because they will not have a cover and so on. And they made a decision. My team made a decision. I delegated to them that I should join that review call, right? Even though I told them like keep it below my level. And they were like, no, like we really need you. It's important. I'm like, okay, first of all, you gotta try your trust of people. You gotta let them make a mistake. I knew exactly what's gonna happen in a call. It ended up being a call, but people talk about it 2 months later, right? It's like, oh my God, like this was nuclear. We've never seen that. Because I went in, right? The other exec did what he does. He went really, really hard and he forgot. We are peers. I'm gonna respond. And I have made a decision that I'm gonna respond with even higher level of, let's say, aggression and assertiveness that they all expected. So, you know, we're going to use polite language here, but like that call turned into something. After we finished, I said like, we finished the call. I dropped out earlier because I had other stuff to do. Right? People were taken aback, like people who were not in the call having to, like, it was like, Jesus, like, oh my God. First of all, what happened with this is like, first of all, our teams find a way forward because it was like, oh my God, we cannot have these two guys in the call again. So we better find a solution. And everybody went back to the polite. And I even spoke with this particular executive separately, right? Later on, one-on-one, we met up, we had a chat. We're okay, right? Because both him and I are similar in a way that we can go and rip each other's heads off. And then after that, we go have a chat and go grab a beer. We are, not everybody knows that. Again, method to the madness, right? It's very intentional. So he did his thing, I did my thing. It also worked in a way that he understands, like, oh, like, okay, like you're not going to be, they're going to, turn another cheek. We something have to do that. So it was intentional, but it was interesting. And then, of course, I came to my team and told them, I told you exactly, guys, what's going to happen. And it was probably a good thing that it happened, but I told you exactly how this is going to go down. And it was funny for them. They also had because some of the folks who organized the whole thing, they're a bit more junior, and they were like, okay, like this is interesting. Like we did not map out behavior of two of you guys. So obviously hardcore type A's, these hard chargers, all the stuff you talk about, right? We should have seen how it's gonna go. I told you how it's gonna go.
The method, so
So
a method to the
it was a method to
madness,
the madness.
right?
It achieved a result, meaning like things are getting addressed now at a level where they should be addressed at expert level, right?
Mhm.
My team has learned something about me, about others. It was good. And I'm kind of happy because even at the heat of the moment, and it went really, really hard, I managed to retain control of what I was doing. It was still intentional,
Mhm.
which kind of was a good moment for me because I did push it to the limit.
Mhm.
I did get a bit upset, right? But it remained controlled
Right.
from my perspective, which was good, right? So you got to put yourself also in situations which kind of like train you, right? This thing like you can only learn things by training so long. You got to put yourself into a actual situation to be able to test out your limits. It went okay, right? I would change a couple of things which I did at that particular meeting, but in general it was okay. I like the fact that even throughout when I was like doing the hardcore counter rant, I was able in my head to kind of like step back and like, okay, you're good, you're good, you're good. Like, that's
Yeah.
something I couldn't do 2 years ago
Right.
when I did the first fire index, right? 18 months ago, let's say.
Mhm.
I could not really do that with the level of intentionality I can do today.
Okay. Okay. And
Okay.
what is interesting is the traits as they are expressed here. So the need for emotional stability, that speaks very much to this calm and collected, being in control. Also the high openness for change, right? What is interesting is extraversion back in the days was on 100. I mean, there's literally no way that it's more. And
Yes.
that seems a little bit uncontrolled on your level, right? Because then if you are so extroverted, there's also a very high need to talk, right? And
Yes.
in your position, you also need to listen, right? And to understand and let the other person come and strategize. So yeah, that's interesting how this is kind of unfolding. But let's also look into the life satisfaction, the state at that time, right? So what we see here is this was we had a profession 50 out of 100, relationships 53, physicality 30, and spirit. So to which degree you are, happy with what you're doing? Is this, congruent? Is this adding to your meaning? So that was the highest actually, but still not too high, right? So something to be improved, right? And
Yes.
you talked about what the situation was. So let's look. That was kind of the status, the executive summary. Now let's look at what were your strategies back then. So you started off, this was your profile, and I now zoom in on the three lowest ones, and there particular we look for the risk and protective factors. So what do we have here for biography? The one second from the bottom, which is, do I have a good relationship with my own past, with my own history, right? So I ignore the negative events of my past. I avoid thinking about the past. So there was this, I only think forward, not backward, right? And then I look back on the habit side, on positive events. I consciously take time to process. And given the ups and downs of my life, I'm pretty happy with who I am right now. So there we can see, if you invest energies toward the protective factors, having a good relationship with your past, that brings you towards resilience. If you invest energy towards the risk factors, like not integrating also the tough stuff in your life, that's something that brings you towards vulnerability, because this is stuff that can still trigger you, right? So that's not fully integrated. I'll just go through it and then we will make sense of it together. Then we have mental agility, right? So again, the two wolves, right? Which wolf do I feed? On the risk factor side, I try to avoid getting feedback. I enjoy staying in my comfort zone. Hard to believe if somebody knows you a little bit, but that is something inside of you. And then on the other hand, there's the protective factor. I frequently pause and reflect upon what I'm actually doing. I consciously take on challenges and I actively seek opportunities to learn. So this brings you towards more resilience. The other thing would have you stay in your comfort zone. And then energy management, which is kind of mental strategies, and you are very strong on mental strategies. So what are risk factors? Being available 24/7. This is kind of a déformation professionnelle on your leadership level, kind of. I have no control over my schedule. And then preparation for challenging situations, knowing when to what you achieve, and separating urgent from important. That is something that it brings you towards resilience. And that is also something that we worked on during the coaching. If you look back, how do you make sense of all of that?
Yeah, it's so logical. I mean, the only thing, and I think we spoke about it, where I disagreed a bit, was saying that some of the things which were marked as kind of like risk factors, I'm like, listen, like, do you want to be a senior executive in a large company or not? Do you want to be this stuff? Yes, 24/7, of course. I mean, I'm accountable for delivery of mission critical services which underpin thousands of customers who are betting their business on us. My entire unit is 24/7. It doesn't mean I'm looking at emails 24/7, but hey, you know what? If you have a major outage, couple of regions are down, yes, I'm going to be on a call 48 hours. It's just like, do you want to do this job or not? There are other jobs you can do, right? So in those kind of like, is it a risk factor? Yes, it is, but you accept it. It's your career choice, right? I'm not in the military. I'm choosing what I'm going to do, right? I'm choosing my profession, and I'm making an agreement and a deal with my company, so to say, in my life, right? So yes, there are risk factors because they affect maybe your lifestyle and so on. Like you might be have a difficult time to handle it, but in the end, you are choosing those, right? So that's one side. Another one is when we talk about like this biography aspect is and this is the part where the only parts where you have a problem with the fire index, where I think it doesn't capture the context of it. And if you remember, we had a conversation. I had a very like politically incorrect example of somebody who was a victim of, let's say, sexual harassment in the childhood. I'm like, well, it can be something dragging you down the whole life, or it can be something where you've gone through it, you maybe use it and then done. And of course, you're not going to think about it all the time, and you are ignoring it in a way. But it doesn't mean that you're ignoring it because it is a horrible place for you to go, and when you go there, your brain freezes and you have a nightmare. No, like, done. I mean,
Integrated. We
we
talk.
we
We say
we,
integrated into your life
we
story,
live in
right?
a world with 3 dimensions and 4 dimensions this time, and for us as human beings, this time is linear, right? Even though we maybe have more dimensions. So I cannot go back to change anything, right? I cannot go back to fix it. What, I'm going to have an anchor around my neck which freaks me out all the time? No. Would it be fun for me that with my knowledge and my capabilities now, I can go back to the time when I was 15? Oh, yeah. You know why? Because by 25, I would be a billionaire because I would know how the market is. It's not going to happen. So no, like you take it, you use it to improve yourself, and then you do kind of like discard it. If the memories are beautiful, maybe you go back to them more often. If they're not beautiful, you don't, right? So that's the way I look at it from perspective of resilience, right?
Makes sense. So let's look at how this further unfolds, right? We are still in the older version, so the 18-month-old version. This is the resilience continuum, which is kind of where did you stand back then, right, in terms of
Yes.
coping mechanisms. So this is the derailed part, meaning, okay, you have strategies, but the strategies you are actually at that time, you were taking a loan from your own system, from your own
Yes,
health,
definitely.
right? And
Definitely I was.
nothing sustainable, right? And also the mental traps at that point, and that's the last one looking back, and then we come to the new one, was, there is, we had this discussion on the unprocessed memories, right? So there's this stuff that might be there triggering you at one point in time. Circular thinking, I mean, absolutely, right? There's so many things that can go wrong. So your mind is always in hyper care mode, like, okay, what do I need to think about? This situation, that situation.
Yes.
What will go out of control next? Where I need to jump? What's fired? Do I need to, extinguish? All that stuff going on. And then the distorted reasoning and denying responsibility part, very low. So actually not a big thing. Yeah. And this is interesting because your traits are so high. Technically, from a textbook perspective, one would say, probably thinking traps are very low, right? Because your traits are so stable. But what the executive fire index obviously is not measuring is the fact that you are having a super high amount of responsibility 24/7, very, very criticality, which then again triggers the mental traps, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now let's see how this 18 months later unfolded. So this is the old version. This is the new version. So this is what happened. So what we see is traits stay pretty much stable. 5 points is pretty normal for a second measuring, right? So it's still the same. It's on the boundary from very high to high. We have your coping strategies. They jumped from 61 to almost 80. So that's a huge jump. So you are now above the norm group in 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
And also your life satisfaction improved from 50 to 66, which is, I mean, still not happy clappy, but a huge development in terms of being, at a good place, being in a good balance. So when you look at that, what do you think?
Well, keep in mind also, like the moment when I was feeling the fire index, I mean, look, whoever tells you that they don't have a variability based on what's happening that week about them, that they're lying, So when I was feeling this thing was, I got out of the very long flight. I landed. During that flight, I cleaned my mailbox. I landed down, connected my laptop, shot out about 70 emails, right? Sat in a taxi, got in a hotel, filled this up, go to grab some food, and I went to meet my team. And so like, was I like the happiest person at that moment? Not really, because I couldn't do the gym that day, right? I was kind of like, in the wrong time zone. I was thinking about things that need to happen because it was a fairly busy week. I was away from my family, which had some small effects. So probably lose a couple of points there, right? If I was doing this on Sunday afternoon, hopefully this weekend, after I'm going to do a weekend of skiing, you'll probably be a very freaking happy camper, right?
Right.
And you will probably also get distorted because, like, I'll be like the happiest person ever. So it goes around, right? Well, what this definitely is that the coping strategies have changed for sure, right? But now you're going to be you're going to scratch your head when I tell you how. I have become more disagreeable and more direct, and that has helped in my coping strategies. And I will give you an example, and I'll try to obfuscate as much as possible because I cannot talk about it openly. But and it actually happened today, and it's a really, really good freaking example. I had a case where an employee, sends an email to top dogs in the company basically saying that, we have a problem which is hugely uh, problematic for the company, a massive risk which kind of like me and my team are ignoring, right? Now, first of all, top dogs in the company, we have built a level of trust, so they don't freak out. They go reach out to me, what's up, right? And now Oz of 18 months ago would be like, oh my God, like this is not a crisis we need to handle. Okay, let's be very, very careful how we answer. Let me think about it 10 minutes, and then I bring my team. And today I was like, this, this is like nothing. It's like the smallest thing I have to handle. So I shot back an email. I said, well, be aware of the context of this employee. These are the issues. We are handling them. You know, uh, it's not a retaliation, but we have a problem here. And what he's telling you is actually pretty much lying. I added three of my folks who are key for this. I told them, please write up a proper answer, full transparency, full cleaning, like nothing, no retaliation, very clear. And then I went back and talked to that person's manager, and we had a really good conversation, really quick one. And the outcome is we're going to cut the access of that person immediately because they're actually becoming a hostile agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a retaliation. It's just that I'm much more direct, much more assertive, doing the right thing. I'm not going to go and freak myself out and sit in a corner, because what I really accepted is what is my responsibility? What is required from me at this level? I have a fiduciary responsibility, and I'm a custodian of the company, and I need to put that first. And in my domain, nobody else is going to do that. This is like one of the key things that had to land in me. There is nobody to go and run to have a conversation with, right? The reason I have this position is because they trust me that I'm going to take care of my domain.
Mm.
So take care of your domain, right? That requires a bit of different behavior, something I had to learn. And as I did, it definitely did increase my resilience. It does mean that I wouldn't say more prone to conflict, not that, but I'm less hesitant about putting a foot down and being very, very clear and direct. Yes, I'm less hesitant. It seems it's working well. It's helping me. I think it's helping my team. I think it's actually beneficial for the company. At least the feedback I'm getting is quite positive. But is it different from what I did before? And have I gotten to this consciously? Yes.
And here's a short message on our own behalf. If you want to work with the Executive Fire Index for yourself, if you want to try it out, if you want to implement it in your company, or if you want to get certified as a practitioner to debrief it yourself, please get in touch with us. How do you do this? Just check out our website, www.executive-fire-index.com. There's a contact form. You can get in touch with us. There are partners that do the certification trainings, and you can all check them out in the practitioner section. Okay, and now back to the debriefing with Oz. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Let's look at how this is reflected in the Executive Fire Index. So here, I mean, this is a very positive development, obviously, right, in two dimensions, and as expected. Then what we see here is the first measurement, and here we see the second measurement. This is also very interesting. So some major shifts, right? So what we see here is the traits. They look pretty much the same, with the exception of extroversion, right? Extroversion is more, I mean, 80 is still high, right?
Maybe I'm just a bit more cautious,
Yeah.
I think that Yeah, because I got some good feedback. I had some good people around me, right, to have a conversation with, and I'm just a bit more cautious, but
And
not much more, of course.
yeah,
I'm still me. I'm still me.
yes. And it could also be that the listening part has been emphasized, right? And
Yeah.
that is why some, well,
Are
let's
you
hope
sure?
that.
Are you sure about
I
that?
just wanted to build you a bridge, Os.
Are you sure about that one? No, I'm kidding. But yeah,
So
good
what's
point.
what's also interesting is from your profile changed quite a bit on the habit side from pronounced self-management to pronounced self-awareness. And I
Hmm.
think this is also talking to the mindfulness
Sorry.
of you're more mindful about what, I mean, not mindful in the way, but mindful in what is the situation required, what
Yes.
does my role require, more fearless to a degree and more kind of strategic in a certain way. I mean, that is what I'm hearing when you
Yeah.
mention your examples, right?
Yes.
And
Definitely.
then also we see that the shape of the life satisfaction is pretty much the same. The values have increased substantially, though, right? And physicality is probably a function of your lifestyle, of the heavy traveling, that you don't have the time for your body that you for yourself that you would want to have, right?
Well, I'm still not happy with that particular part. Like, the aspect where, do I try to be as disciplined as I can, but the key is as I can, right? So I've been, for instance, for the last couple of months, I've been really like focusing on trying to improve my sleep. And it ends up being a bit of a Sisyphus exercise. I get like a good week and then it kind of deteriorates. I actually flip back to using Whoop, right? Allows me to really map sleep well. Um, and I wouldn't say it's not progressing, but it really makes it clear to me how difficult it is, right?
Mm,
For that part. So when you talk about physicality, like that's the part where is it better? Yes. I'm not happy with it because I can clearly see when I get my sleep right and stuff like that, when I get my nutrition right, like it doesn't affect my performance. I can do things better and so on. I can still power through the days when I'm not good, right? Because I have traveled a lot. I have done, on Monday, right? I mean, Monday to Tuesday this past week, I did not sleep at all because I was kind of like jet lag messed up. I ended up like basically not being able to sleep the whole night. Um, and it was really rough, right? And then kind of like I stabilized in the middle of the week. Right now, I'm talking to you, right? You know that I just came out of a 12-hour flight. Luckily, I slept on it, right? So, this is why I'm not ecstatic. It's
yeah,
better, but also it's just the fact of how I live and the work I do, right?
right.
And I'll try to push it further and improve it as much as I can. But it's
Yeah.
not easy thing to do, definitely.
And what I also like about your explanation is it's a constant fight, right? Every
Yes,
week,
it is.
because
It is.
depending on where you are and what your calendar looks like, how do
Yeah,
I build in the right things for me? And it requires creativity and every week is a new challenge, right?
it is, right. And you really need to discipline, you have to force yourself and so on. Like I'm super disciplined with exercise, so I'm really happy with that. Also because I get a lot of like a mental strength out of it as well. Um, Honestly, and people really underestimate that, like sleep is the biggest problem because your body is your body, and it's not because I do some rumination or some crazy things in my head. It's just like physically I can't fall asleep, right? Sometimes when you're like messed up, time zones hit you and stuff like that. Like this week, I spent the entire week in the Far East, right, Southeast Asia. I came back home. I'm going to go for a weekend. We're going to do some skiing. It's going to be awesome. Monday morning, I'm flying to the West Coast, right? And those are like, -8, +8, +8, 9. It's going to be rough, right? I fully do expect that, by mid next week, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going to fall into red. Like my resting heart rate, my HRV is going to drop. My sleep is going to, I'm going to build up sleep debt again, 100%. And then will I be able to power through it? Yes, I can power through it, right? I'm good at
Mm,
this, but
mm.
but I also am very much aware of the tax on the body it's making, right? I'm
Yeah,
not,
absolutely.
we ignoring it is a very naive thing to do.
Right. It's only working for so long, right?
Exactly.
And so let's look at the coping strategy. So this is where we started off,
Hmm.
and this is what has been developed. So what we see
Hmm.
is it is in some areas it's still the same shape, but everything is more pronounced, right? So we
Hmm.
see personality is pretty stable. Your connection to your biography, to your life story has changed quite a bit, quite drastically from,
Mhm.
the lowest point to the highest point. Attitude, also the, getting yourself from victim mode into shaper mode is super high, even though, and that is on top of your high traits, right? So you have, if you compare the traits to your bones, you have strong bones and strong muscles, right?
Yes.
So you have doubled it, kind of doubled down on it. Mental agility, same thing, right? You have high on originality, which is the bone, right?
Mhm.
You're open for new experiences, and then there is this going out of your comfort zone on top of that muscle. So again, and this we see in high performing leaders at top management level, right, where you need both in order to cope.
Yes.
Energy management. So these are the mental strategies. Mind body axis, that is the one that is pretty much the same, because that constant struggle that you were talking about quite a bit. Then also authentic relationships, like making time for your family, significant others, for friends, for mentors. That was high, still high, and meaning has even improved in terms of, why am I doing what I'm doing? How is that adding to a greater good? And how do I feel about it? So all of that seems stronger and more in control.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm not surprised by it. I mean, honestly, like, well, when it comes to authentic relationships, like I'm still not happy there, right? Uh, Primarily because I do have a fairly extreme travel for the past couple of weeks, and it's gonna kind of like propagate into late May and early June. That's the way, also kind of like the way our business functions. First half of the year is always more intensive. So I'm not kind of like, I accept it. It's a fact of life. I'm not too happy about it because I would like to actually be able to spend a bit more time at home, right? And I do not really have managed to reduce it right now. It's just the nature of the role and what needs to be done and so on. So that's why it's not even higher, because it's okay, all fine, all is good, but I would like to be able to spend a bit more time home right now. But it is what it is, right? And then by summer, and we have this, like, we have an annual rhythm, so to say, right? So from like mid-Feb up until end of June, we go fairly intense with the travels, because it's first half of the year. There's a lot of like customer interaction and stuff like that. So it's just the way, just the nature of work, right? But it also means that in that first half of the year, I always kind of like a bit more like a grumble a bit more with this.
Right.
It's just, a bit more extreme. And then, if you look at second half of the year, it always kind of like tapers down. We start going into the budget planning for next year and so on. So it becomes more intellectual, so to say, right?
Right.
And I enjoy that as well.
Although tapering down doesn't really mean chilling out, right? I mean,
No. But it means, like, you're not jumping from Far East to West Coast US every second weekend and stuff like that. You do get to control things more and plan more. You can even, like, if you're going to say, you know what, actually next week I want to stay home, you can actually cancel stuff, and there is no panic with that. So it's a bit, you get a bit more in control.
right.
They're just the rhythm of business, I would say.
Okay, so very nice development. And then we have the resilience continuum, which was derailed 18 months ago and is now in resilient. So
Okay.
this is still, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
given your level, I
Yeah,
think making it into the resilient field, giving all the pressures of your role, that's quite an achievement. And as you say, it requires constant work. There's
it
no
is constant
letting it
work.
slide, right? It's
Yeah.
making time, having the stuff. Do you plan stuff in your calendar where you do something for yourself?
Yeah. I do. Absolutely, I do. Right. But the fact of life is also, I think this resilience goes up also because I'm now what in like I'm entering the third year being in a particular domain, particular role. So yes, I have a leadership team fully in place, stuff like that, things are in control. I'm really good at delegation, actually, something I think is one of my biggest strengths. So it works well. Like, what if, if the company would go and say, hey, would you want, can you please take this other division? I think this will go back in a derailed, right? I think it also depends on how much it takes work to get into that field. And it's not just like some psychological self-awareness mental exercise. It's actually stuff you do. Like the people you hire, the way you set up your business, the way you set up a system and system and people to resolve issues so that things get resolved without you, right? And I've seen many leaders who are my peers or similar to being my peers, right, who they like being in the middle of the battle of the time, being the one making all decisions, being the one to take it on the chest. I don't have problem with doing it, but I think it's very dumb if that's the way you want to do it all the time, because many people find that the way, like, this is how they're going to show value. They're driving and executing and being in the driving seat.
Mm,
I'm like, well, no, that's not how you actually achieve results at a large scale. You achieve it by 80-90% of your domain, your organization actually executing without so you just go in and maybe have a conversation to understand things and so on and so forth. But ideally, you have capable people who can push things forward, and not every single thing requires you to make a decision or to drive or to push.
mm,
And leaders who neglect building that, they may fake out so it looks like they're super resilient, but actually they're playing with fire.
mm,
And a lot of it is coming also from I've seen plenty of people who don't like hiring people who are better than them.
mhm.
I prefer to hire only people who are better than them. Ideally, 10 of them can replace me tomorrow. And I really honestly believe by doing that, I'm helping myself the most,
Mhm, mhm. And the
to be honest with
organization,
you. And the
right?
organization for sure. I mean, you do it for the business, right?
Yeah,
But in terms of kind of like this context, like being more resilient, that's the biggest thing I can do if I want to help myself as well.
yeah. And
Um,
I think this is super important what you say, that effective delegation, trust in your people, hiring the right talent, organizing yourself well is a capacity that adds to your resilience. That's many
yes.
people don't make this connection, right?
No,
If
but
you
you
have
have
a
to be very, very clear also then with what you're good at, what you're not good at. And
Mhm,
that's a very hard conversation to do with yourself. uh, you know, I go down and sit down for an hour and go through a very detailed conversation about esoteric aspects of our P&L, or the way we are defining, measuring cost of cloud aspect. Like, yeah, I can. Do I enjoy it? No, it's boring as hell. Like, so yes, I'm gonna have people who are really, really good at that. But then, you want me to think through a complex systemic issue and define a strategic path forward and take into account patterns and elements which people consider to be completely disconnected across the company, and put them together to figure out how we are going to push forward on a particular front. Yeah, like, I'm really bloody good at that. Like,
mhm,
really good at that. Really good at that. So, and I enjoy it, right? So that's my strength. And I'm going to double down on it. And I'm going to bring in people who can offset the areas where I'm not good, or which I particularly dislike. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not able to do them, right? At a level, a certain level of seniority, you need to be able to really do things which you don't like. And you cannot have any area where you're like really, really bad. It doesn't work like that. You got to be good at everything. Got to be able to understand finance, understand people, and understand, in my case, technology domain and all this stuff. You got to be able to do it. But you also need to be very clear with yourself. What are your absolute strengths and what are the things you're not that good at? And then really double down and use those top strengths even more, because they're going to deliver the most value for the company, for organization, for you. And then again, if you're a leader, if you're a manager, find a way that you have, build up a team and people around you who can offset your weaknesses.
yeah, makes sense.
And for
Yeah.
many people, it's hard to accept that there are areas where there are weaknesses,
Mhm, mhm.
right? It's a matter of, self-awareness. It's a matter of self-confidence. It's a matter of, arrogance and ego, right? Usually people who get to the top organization, they have a high level of ambition, right? And they haven't gotten there by discussing and showing their weaknesses, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so so being able to check your ego a bit helps, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and I think at least works for me.
Yeah. One more thing, also for the interest of time. So
Mhm.
there is something interesting happened to your mental traps. So this is the first measurement. The second measurement looks like this. So I'm curious what happened here. So
I
what?
have no idea. Explain it to me.
So the
You're
circle.
you're my shrink.
Sure,
Explain
sure.
it
I'm
to
your
me.
shrink. Absolutely. So circular thinking, same thing, right? Exactly the same value. So
Mhm.
that's the, finding the error, anticipating what's happening next, what can blow off,
Mhm.
right? we see unprocessed memories has, shrunk to a, looking back, integrating it right
Yeah.
into your own being at ease with it, not being triggered by it.
Yeah.
And then there's something interesting happened, that the distorted reasoning part. This is when your emotions, maybe it has to do with the example that you mentioned in the beginning, that you let your emotions into your executive function where you make decisions, right? So this
Yeah.
is where you're getting emotional, you are getting irrational to a certain degree, maybe consciously, maybe
Yeah.
hypothesizing, right? And then denying responsibility. I mean, this is interesting because this is victim mode, actually.
Hmm.
So that would say you are, compared to 18 months ago, you are often in a state where you are unhappy with the situation and you're a little bit in a complaining, whining mode, not very much,
Hmm.
but for a short period of time. And then you bounce back. Maybe it's also something that you see, these mental traps are more in the moment. So when something happens, we have this metaphor of the pendulum swinging, metaphor of Taipei 101 pendulum swinging, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to normal zero and you're back to normal. But that is how it would look like when you're triggered.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. I mean,
ending
generally, what
hypothesis?
I don't know. Like, I can tell you one thing. Like, I never, when I think about a problem, right, I will be very blunt and clear describing it, but always in a package of this is what we're gonna do, right? Like, I don't spend a minute thinking in a context like, oh my God, like this is happening to us, like this is happening to us, this is what we're gonna do, right? So I really don't know.
So,
I really don't know, right?
listening to all of what you say, maybe one
Huh.
hypothesis that I would have is that so when something is a crisis situation, a
Mhm.
crunch situation, rather than trying to suppress all your emotions, that you let them bubble up a little bit so that they are useful for you
For
without
sure I
losing
do that.
control, right?
For sure I do that. I mean, I'm
Mm,
not a robot, right? But it's always in the context of this is what we're gonna do, this is gonna achieve, this is how we're gonna win, right? It's never in the context of, oh my God, like, there's nothing we can do. Now, I am very critical in the context, and that's kind of like part of what I am, and my role is I am looking for problems all the time, very actively. I have to, right? Because the things which are in my domain are related to security and compliance and the quality of service at a very large scale, and this massive budget with which if we blow it up, it'll blow up the entire company. So I continuously am trying to find what's broken. It doesn't put me in a negative mindset that the world is bad, but I do have to wear a critical hat a
mhm,
lot of time,
mhm.
a lot, because it's part of the role, right? I'm not in a sales role. I'm not trying to like, close deals and grow stuff. There is other part of people we have two major goals in the company. One is to achieve the growth of our revenue. That's a huge determinant factor on value of the company. Second one is the profitability, the operating cash flow, so to say, in a package with customer satisfaction. Those two latter are falling squarely into my accountability. And
Mm,
for those, you need to, you're running around with trying to see where's the hole, like,
yeah.
trying like stress testing, like, is this bad? Is there a hole here? There a hole here? There a hole here? Um, so they could show up in this manner, but it's not in the context of not a victim mentality, like, oh my God, like, there's nothing we can do and the world is horrible. No. Oh, we have a hole here. It's a big one. It's pretty horrific thing to look into it, right? Let's open the gates of hell. Let's look into it. And then, we go into that hell and mess it up and freeze it. Um, that's pretty much the way it functions, right?
Right, right.
But it's coming also from the perspective that I'm feeling much more comfortable in my role, meaning like I have much better knowledge and understanding of my domain. I have a much better understanding of where the skeletons are buried and where the mines are, right? I know where they are. And then you're making decisions, which of these are you going to tackle immediately? Which one of these you need to park because you have constrained resources. And those mines still exist and you know them, but you're like, huh, well, I'm gonna park this mine for 2 years. I cannot touch it now. It's probably not gonna blow up because here I'm having the one which is already like, the fuse is on fire. I gotta put down the fuse.
Right.
So maybe that affects a lot, just because like you learn more, you know more, right? It's much easier. Like in the early stage of my role, there was many things I didn't know where things are, and then it was like nicer life because yes, the pressure was huge, but there was just also this lot of things I was not aware of. Now you see all of them, right? And you cannot unsee them.
Hmm. Right.
But in many cases, in some cases, you cannot tackle them yet because you need to prioritize. You are having constrained budget, constrained people, constrained timelines, right? And priorities of the business, you got to take them into account. So you're doing something which nobody really likes to do, especially if you feel ownership for things, which is doing nothing about something, which may be important because there is other more important things. That's not an easy thing to do if you feel responsibility and ownership for something you're owning or something you're trying to do, right? So
Right.
they might have an effect, I guess, you know.
Last question before you got to run to your next escalation. Uh, Osman, 18 months in between the two measurements. How well do you find yourself captured and described with the development in the executive fire index?
No, pretty well. I mean, I think it's really good. The only part where I kind of like I told you earlier where I've in the first one was this aspect of biography because I don't think it has been impacting me that much as it looked in the fire index. But in
Mhm.
the end, right, you're answering those specific questions.
Right.
And there is plenty of them. Every one of these measures is tied to a specific few questions, right? Few of them, not
Mhm.
25.
Right.
So it's easy for you to maybe like even scroll the thing wrongly and stuff like that. And then they have some algorithm in the back, give you the result, like the one which is showing now around this now responsibility. I definitely don't deny my responsibility. On the contrary, maybe I'm like taking it even, I said taking it too much, but I really take it seriously, right?
Mm.
So then they would say like, well, that's weird, right? And I wonder like, which question specifically which I answered when I was drawing this thing left and right, which pan out with that.
Mm.
But in generally, I think it captures the level of satisfaction and the level of comfortability in your role, right? And in video life quite well. It is a snapshot in time though. It is a snapshot in time, like almost like a balance sheet in the financial terms,
Right.
and that can change in a week or so, right? Like you can have something happening this week, which can be in a personal sphere or whatever, which really flips you go from here to here fairly fast if
Absolutely. Yeah.
things do that. So it kind of like I think it's beneficial. What I find cool about it when I think about it is which aspects there are more permanent, more sustainable. So they describe where you are as outside of like daily wobble and then identify something you can do. Which ones are, oh, I was just like jet lagged and tired, or somebody made me angry in a line in a bank, or somebody sent a really crappy email, and then now I'm a bit upset for 15 minutes, and then you probably should be more conscious when you feel the index
Mm.
as a person.
Mhm.
Like that's something to advise to folks who are maybe doing this. When you're taking an index, like try to be at the position or in a situation where you don't have something really disruptive right now, so so it captures your base state, not some
Peaks.
like short-term peak or short-term, like example held to like the U.S. government announces tariffs for Canada, stock goes down, then they say we
Right.
don't dare look. I'm like, yeah, like you're not gonna do business planning based on like this, right? Like
Right.
what's a fairly persistent long-term pattern, and then what are elements with this pattern which allow you to execute, because also having a finding which like, okay, you have a problem here, but there's nothing you can do about it, doesn't help you. What are the things you can actually do something about
Right. Yeah.
and take action against is very important, right? That's why, interpretation is, so you and I work together because, we were talking about things like how to interpret this and what are the things where I can actually do something consciously, be there in the context of development or change, whatever, right? Versus things which, okay, like this is pretty much given, right? And in trying to change it is like banging your head in a wall, maybe you're wasting your time.
Right. Yeah.
That's important.
Great explanation, great making sense, and great metaphors. I love them, Osrin. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and
Thank you.
shedding light on your inner world. And I let you go to your next meeting and talk soon, Osrin. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Karsten. It was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So this was a deep dive in the resilience of a top executive. What do you think about it? What are your reflections? Any thoughts? So get in touch with us via our website. You find a contact form on our website, executive-fire-index.com. Also, you may leave us your thoughts, your suggestions, any questions that you might have on how to work with the FIRE index. Just get in touch with us. Thank you so much for listening. All the best. And yeah, see you soon on another episode of the Executive Fire Podcast.